What's up?
Hey.
Who are you voting for?
I'm voting for, I was going to say freedom, but then that sounds like you're voting for someone. Funny, that guy.
Which one?
The one who starts with T, Mr. Trump. I was just finishing up the last week on this doc series I've been working on for almost the last year. And we were staying at the Trump Hotel because it was the only non-smoking hotel.
You don't have to justify it.
I know.
You can stay there.
But the athlete that we were working with wanted to be in a non-smoking environment, and he didn't want to stay at the hotel where the main actual competition was happening because he gets swarmed by fans. So we stayed at the Trump Hotel, and the hurricane was happening in Florida. So Trump decided to leave Florida to come to Nevada because there was no bad weather there.
Wow.
So we're there, and it was the worst thing for a documentary ever because we have camera gear and we are constantly coming in and out of the hotel all day. And every time we came in, we had to go through a Secret Service thing. Our car got searched. Wow. They're pulling apart our gear on the road. Then we go into the hotel, and then there's metal detectors everywhere. And they had to power our camera. It was the scariest thing ever because I would always forget to take. You don't want to take memory cards out because you want to keep. We would shoot with 1 terabyte cards. It's a new style. Wow. We put 2 1 terabyte cards in, rolling that all day. They're both recording, so it's a backup.
Wow.
So you only take the one card out, back that up, and then we would just leave the 1 terabyte card in the camera until eventually it needs to format, which is after like 3 days. But anyways, so we'd always keep the memory cards in the camera, and the Secret Service is there pressing every button on our camera. And that's what they had to do that legally.
You should have taken the card out.
I know.
Before you.
I know. So but I would always, sometimes I'd come in, I'd be like, oh shoot, can I take my card? And he's like, you can't touch the camera, sir. And then like they have dogs there.
Wow.
And because they want to know, like, you know, like if there's one of those buttons, I mean, but what's hilarious, so if one of those buttons is going to be the bomb, you're in the lobby and they're pressing every, it was wild. And then I would go up, and like the person we were filming, he was on one of the top floors, which is where Trump's staff, and I think Trump was on one of those floors. So you have to go through another layer of Secret Service, and they're asking your name. You know, they've done the background check, so once they would like have your name on this list, they would be fine. But anyways, me being a documentarian, I started talking to the Secret Service and just be like, I'm like, so can you ever be on your phone? They're like, no. I'm like, so you have to stand here all day? They're like, yeah. I'm like what kind of insoles do you have? Like, just talking to them. They had to stand in the same place.
Start talking shoes.
Yeah, start talking shoes. 13 hours in loafers.
Wow.
That's not a glamorous job.
Yeah, it's like Buckingham Palace.
Yeah, and that's what I brought up to the guy. I asked him, I go, who are you going to vote for? And the Secret Service guy, like, you know, he was humming and hawing. I kept pushing him. I was asking him every day. I'm like, oh no, who are you going to vote for, man? And eventually he just goes, well, the way we talk about it in the Secret Service is when we say, who do you vote for? You say, where do you want to be at Christmas? And essentially, because you have to protect the families and kin and all that for your candidate, whoever you're assigned to, he goes,
they want to be in Florida.
They want to be somewhere nice. And he was like, Trump, he has so much family and so many people connected to him that he's like, I'm probably voting for the person with a smaller family. That's all he said. So
that's the state of the decision making in this country. The state of the decision making. I mean, it's not really a politics podcast.
No, I know we're here, but speaking of decision making, though, so the big decision. Sorry,
well, what happened with the shoot? I mean, speaking of the shoot, I haven't even caught up with you on it yet.
Yeah, so I know I've been working on this doc series that. You know, we both have been consulting on, and you've been on some of those shoots. And I guess I can say it now because I think by the time this podcast comes out, the trailer will be out. But been working on a doc series with CBUM, Christopher Bumstead, who's kind of this generation's Arnold Schwarzenegger's, the way a lot of people see him. Though he hasn't had a movie career yet, like Arnold, but hopefully one day. Or politics career, or as much controversy, but no. But Arnold's an amazing. Like, we all look up to Arnold, and you know, it'd be amazing if we could ever get his involvement on the project.
American Dream.
Dream. Yeah.
I don't know if anyone had it more.
But still, one of the best films, Pumping Iron. Yeah. If you haven't seen that film, definitely go watch it. That was
one of the top docs of all time.
It was a huge inspiration for this film. So we've been making the documentary. What's great is it was actually because of Art of Documentary. So one of our students, one of the filmmakers in Art of Documentary, Calvin Utenham, he's been working with Chris, filming him for 7 years. And so it's not often that you have a project that is brought to you where you have 7 years of archival footage from someone who has documentary instincts like Calvin, who is there living with the character. Like, literally for a couple of years, he lived with Chris until Chris got married, and just has everything documented and like documented really well. Like, he showed me his hard drives, and it's like categorized per month, per day, per shoot, per location. It's incredible. You know, there's times I tease Calvin saying like, you know, we got to get rid of the micro jitters. You know, he was many of those years was handheld mirrorless cameras.
Because he wasn't shooting it for a doc. He was just
he's just doing YouTube. And it's funny because Calvin has actually at times put his camera on a shoulder rig and gone professional. And the audience hasn't liked that. I guess they've wanted him to go back to that shaky camera style, which I guess kind of feels more.
Who wants a steak when you could order a Big Mac?
Yeah, right. I guess it feels more authentic.
People, I mean, that's a funny thing. Their appetite online is usually more raw, right? So you have to be ready for that type of shooting.
Yeah. Well, I'm always impressed because you're like, we can talk about the doc more, but I always have been so encouraged when I work with you because you'll just pick up. Like even today, I was saying like you're going to go do this shoot. You're doing a doc down in the States right now, and it's pretty high profile director you're working with, but you're just you're like, oh, I have a 24-70. I have one memory card. I have 3 batteries. You're like, I'll be good, man. Because I'm like, what gear do you need? What gear? And then you just need the 24-70 and the Helios, and you're good.
I mean, it's it's one of these, I guess, decisions I'm at in my life where the content that comes out on social media now is very good. There's no, like, the quality of it. It looks great. People, the LUTs and whatnot, it always looks so good. And I think as I'm going on any project, I was just doing this short doc on this fisherman. We could talk about that a little bit. But yeah, I'm going to do this project and my head is just by default going to what am I shooting?
Yeah.
Not what am I shooting on?
Yeah.
It's like, what am I shooting? Like, I think that's where I spend 90% of my time. And then I message you and I'm like, hey, you got one of those Helios lenses? Do you have a mist filter? Something that can muddy it up, make it look a little more warm and beautiful. For sure spend some time on that.
Yeah.
I would never
can't completely neglect it.
No. And I think it's important to think about. I just as I watch so many of the film, I just think of bandwidth. How much bandwidth does a one-man band have? A lot of these projects are 1-2 person projects. Same with you. You've got a little bit, you had a big crew in Vegas. It was a bigger-ish.
Yeah, only because it was a live event. But most of 85% of that film has just been Tad and I, our producer.
So you can manage the toys a bit more, I guess is what I'm saying. It's like when you've got a few more people, like if you have a DP, of course, they can manage that aspect of it. But I think for anybody, a lot of people probably listening to this, it's 1 or 2 people, creatives making the project. I just say 90% of the time, focus on the story.
Yeah.
Like what are you shooting? Like time of day, locations, characters, what experiences are we going to give those characters? How are we going to make it feel, like they don't need to perform or they don't need to, regurgitate, like they can just live and put them in environments where we can get something exciting, like catch something in the moment. So it's, I think, I don't know where we were going with that.
It was just using like less gear.
But I right, with bringing the camera down, it's like, I think the place where these cameras are these days, it's like literally I'm going to fly tomorrow with the 24-70 FX3 and 1 vintage lens, which I more or less just use for some sit downs. Yeah. Just to make it bloomy and a little nicer. But other than that, I don't need anything else.
Yeah. No, I remember I was so stressed before that Trails of Dust film, the one I got to do with DJI. And because it was the 4D and I was like, I've never used this for doc. I want to go and in the end, it was fine. You wouldn't know, there's just a lot more camera.
Shots look beautiful.
They look beautiful, right? Because there was so much more movement than I'm used to having in my films. And I really enjoyed the experience. But looking back, I was like, it just comes down to story. Like I know we're always saying that.
You didn't get any, I would say like you didn't get, and you got way better. And I know it's different type of parameters in terms of, how many days and time, but like if you look at Riscate or if you even look at the tornado film Chasing from the South, or when we did No Country is an Island, like you look at any of those films and there's so many more real moments.
Absolutely.
Like Trails of Dust is because you are become a slave to your gear.
It's true.
Like when you want to bring out this rig, when you want to bring out this camera, you have to manage that. That's your actors become, or your characters become almost a secondary thought, right? And you can see
the camera was a character at that point.
The camera becomes, and I think you see that in the work, right?
Yeah.
Is that, and so it's, again, then when you go to the film production, then like a big production where you have 10 people, 20 people on set, obviously then the director can focus on characters and stuff. And there's people managing the art direction. There's people doing all that. But I think like, look at some of your past projects, like where did I get the most emotion from my characters? Like the most real moments, okay, ASD band, right? It's like, and it's often probably just you in the room on some of these, like if you really look at
when you really break it down,
it's like, it's you.
You don't want to be stuck in that no man's land. And I would say that's the best films, you think His Name is Ray, which you can go watch that. That's Mike's feature film. It's on our YouTube channel. Powerful film. You never had any other crew. It's just you. And I think of the best moments in this film that I've done with CBUM, Christopher Bumstead. It was just him and I in the room.
Yeah.
I think of Riscate, just me and Dominican. Then there's the No Man's Land, which I like the polish of a Trails of Dust, but it didn't have the authenticity of the other films, as you're implying. The No Man's Land is where you don't have the budget to have a big crew, because as you mentioned, when I've worked on really big projects, like the last scene for the ASD band film was my biggest crew, but I had enough of a budget for that scene that I didn't have to touch gear. I could still just completely focus on story. I had everyone's cameras wirelessly coming to me, and I was able to direct it and really focus on story. But that's because I was at that kind of, not a feature film, but it was a feature film, but I had that bigger budget crew. But as a filmmaker, when you get stuck in the no man's land, or I don't know if that's the right term, but when you have too much gear, not enough crew, it absolutely destroys your storytelling capabilities, because you're so focused. Do I have batteries? Do I have cards? Is this working? Is this balanced? Where we go? Oh, I rented this one lens. I have to use this lens. And honestly, in the end, it probably would just benefit you. And I found even this film with CBUM, I put all this pressure at the beginning. I came down with anamorphic lenses, and I had the LiDAR follow focus. And in the end, what was I doing, man? I was sometimes FX3 with a 24-70, or I was with my FX6, and still I actually ended up, as the film went on, I got rid of the helio, so I kept it with me. I got rid of even my 28-45 because the focus wasn't great. I just found myself back on the lens that I've shot so many of our films on in YouTube, the 24-70.
Yeah, it's like, I guess it works for that project because you're at the climax of a guy's 7-year career or 6-year, whatever. You're on the biggest stage, 10-year career. You're on the biggest stage for him. It's a lot of stakes. Doesn't matter, it really doesn't. Like, I mean, I think, and it's going to look beautiful because the foundations. I mean, you know how to shoot, you know how to compose, you're still on a good camera. You guys are going to be able to color it well. Like, everything's going to be, it's going to be there to make it special. I guess the thing I'm at in my career though is just thinking about, how do I make whatever project I'm working on, how do I set the characters up for, success? Whatever, I don't know if it's success, but I'm just, how do I find moments? Like real moments, not always narrated voiceover with beautiful B-roll, but like, what do I need to do as a director to create a shooting environment where I can create magic? Like, it's not a, it's generally not a more gear thing. Like, in my experience, it's generally not. And I know, I can talk about this project roughly that I'm going to do is with Derek C in France, and he's shooting this project called Roof Man, and
Channing
Tatum's in it. And he's playing the burglar. He's a serial burglar who was robbing McDonald's, cutting holes in the roof, and that's how he got the name. And he went to jail, escaped jail. It's a crazy true story.
Yeah, it's wild.
And, I was talking, I'm like, where are you shooting initially? Budget? They're like, they happened in North Carolina. That's where it took place. And he's like, we might have to put it in New Jersey. And it's like, okay, I don't know so much about the scripted world. I'm like, okay,
sounds great.
Sounds okay. And he goes, I go, why do you sound upset? He goes, because I can't turn the camera any fucking way I want. Like, I have to point the camera down this street, like we have to art direct that way. I don't want to have to just point the camera this way. What if I want to look that way?
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's not a real experience for Channing. It's like, what are you doing for your actor when you're like, oh,
don't go down this way.
Don't go this way. Don't look this way. It's like, we're not actually shooting in a real Toys R Us. Like, he hid out in a Toys R Us, this character, when he was escaping. Or it's like, it's like you're faking it.
Yeah.
And I think I learned from him, and just trying to apply it to documentary, is like, you want to create an environment that's as real as possible, whether it's for an actor or for your character, that they can just be themselves as much. And that's why I love documentaries, frankly, is because generally you are in their bedroom, you're in their, you're on their stage. And so it's like, that to me, though, is where the focus needs to be. It's like, I want to just make this environment as livable, as real as possible, so you can do your thing and we can film it.
I learned too, I've learned that so much this year, especially on the CBUM film. One thing is like never mention the N-word, Netflix, to people, because everyone then feels like that's the biggest stage for filmmaking, because they're like, oh, what do you hope to do with this film? You're like, oh, the goal would be Netflix. But then I've found everyone when you start rolling the camera, they're like, I'd even hear some people say under their breath, because I have the mics, they're like, oh, this is Netflix, like I got to look better. And it's like, puts so much pressure on these. Yeah, it's like a lot of people, and you felt like you would bring that to the characters early on so that you would earn their trust that you're going to be going for the top thing. But I feel like trust is better built through your character than a promise. Yeah. Like, I mean, we're going to take it and pitch it to Netflix. We have the producers and the pathway to do that, but still, why put that pressure on these scenes that you want to feel so intimate? And I found that creating an environment that people could feel at peace with, that took time to earn that. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really glad our producer, Tad, he always said on this project, the goal is that 6 months from now, when Chris is going to competition, he wants us in the room. Yeah. Like him, his wife, and us. And honestly, it was like 5 a.m. We're getting up. Chris is just there in his underwear, making his meal. His wife's up. Everyone's groggy. And we had, spent time to earn that trust with them. They're amazing people. It wasn't that they were untrustworthy. It's just that he's trying to win his 6th title. There's a lot of pressure. If he eats the wrong food or too much of, he literally had like a little crack scale measuring his salt. Oh, yeah. And if he puts too much salt in the meal, it's like, it's when you're that depleted, little adjustments have such a huge impact on how your body appears on stage. So there's pressure in that environment, and you don't want to be adding to that. And it meant sometimes before I came to the room, I'm like, I really want my FX3, but I'm like, or my FX6, but maybe this is an FX3 moment. Or it was just things where it's like, okay, I'm not going to have extra gear, or in this case, I may just have to sit back. But the thing I learned from you, Mike, that was so helpful for this film is the second I saw my character, I asked Chris, I go, how do you want me to approach this film? Like the best conversation I had with him is I go, paint me a picture of you being upset with me. Like, let's sit down. This was early in the project. Yeah. I was like, we're at Olympia. What's going wrong? Actually, this was halfway through the project because I wasn't feeling like filming was going the way I wanted. And I said, just like, paint me the picture, Chris, of what am I doing wrong? Like, just like, let's go there. Let's have that argument now so that we don't have to then. He's like, it would be you filming, it's like sneakily filming me. Right. Like, cause that doesn't build trust. If you're like, he's had past filmmakers like leave a camera down and he doesn't like that. He goes, and also just come to our room and don't have the camera rolling. Like come say hi to us. And I was like, yeah, it's what we always say, like meet them as a person, then be the filmmaker. And then the thing I just taught Chris though is right away in the first 5 minutes, I would put a mic on him. I'd say, hey, I'm not rolling. Let's get the mic on you now, just so we get out of the way. And that taught them that then they were so used to the process of seeing me and expecting a mic to be put on them that deep into the prep, like the last hours before he's going to the competition, he's not shocked when I'm coming in and just, hey man, how's it going? Like, how's your morning? And I'm like sticking the mic on.
That's what you're there to do.
Yeah, but we had to learn, like I had a sound team on earlier on, like a mixer and a boom operator. And he just told me, he's like, I just don't like the boom. And so I was like, okay, we're just going to switch to 16 to 35 some days and use our own boom, we're just getting close, or it's like, oh, I'm going to have to get better at my miking. I've always kind of avoided miking, but I was baptized by fire on this. And I've just realized that the trust, like so much of filmmaking isn't what you're recording. It's the relationship you're building with your character, the people in your film. And that has to be your number one priority, because if that is not prioritized, it will show up on screen. Doesn't matter what lenses, doesn't matter how good the cameras are, doesn't matter what environment. If there's a strain between you and your characters in your film, the audience will feel that through the lens. Because by the time we were backstage at the competition, Chris is coming around corners and he's smiling. He's coming up to me. He's telling me what was happening on stage. And it's because we had built this relationship. And I really appreciate that Chris leaned into that, because you could just be another camera to him. And then it's like, then you're just following him. He's not part of the film. And it's like, I've learned that so much on this, that I need to go into these films with a humility that says my process that I think works on my other films may not work on this. And it didn't at the beginning. It was like, I was kind of messing it up. Like I was coming into their kitchen and I had heard some stuff that Derek had said about like setting up scenes. And I tried that. Was like, okay, guys, talk about this now. And Courtney and his wife, Courtney and Chris told me later on, they're like, we hated that. Like it was awkward. Like you just told us to have a conversation and then your camera's rolling, and they're like, so we had to keep it natural, and we'd always get them doing something. We'd come in and be like, hey, like, why don't you guys make breakfast, and then like let the conversation come up. And like, rather than saying, talk about this, like they would in reality TV. And then it feels like that,
Yeah, I think a lot of this depends on, you and the character. You guys have to agree on what you're making. Like, I think he talked about the sneaky filming. I think there's also like the sneaky intention of what you're filming.
Yeah.
So it's, my experience with that is you guys were aligned both on some of the filming rules of the miking and whatnot, but also aligned on, like, you knew what kind of film you guys are making. Like, there's not going to be any, because he's a big name.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have gotten the green light with him if, this was whatever. You had to play ball with him in a certain way, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's important for filmmakers to really understand is you don't have to become lovey-dovey or whatever. You don't have to become best friends with your character, but you also don't need to become Michael Moore with your characters and try to find that, gotcha moment.
Yeah.
But you got to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, you have to know which one you're doing, and the character should generally know.
And I think they should know your intention.
Oh, they
don't have to understand your process.
Clear, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Is, like, I know, whether, like, let's take, a Transformer, for instance. There was a scene in it where Janae is presenting as Matt and training with her buddies in the gym and saying, like, come on, this weight, don't be a weak little bitch. And, because she's with her buddies. And then when she watched the film, was like, hey, because she didn't have creative control. But in the contract, we put like creative consult.
You said a meaningful creative input or whatever.
Yeah, like meaningful creative input or something.
But
she could,
but not final cut.
Yeah, so she that was her only note of the whole film was, I didn't like that scene. Could we remove it? I feel like it's degrading to women. I feel like it's going to make me look bad. But because we had like real conversations early on, being like, listen, we're not trying to make this for the LGBT community. We're not trying to make this for any community. Yeah. We're trying to be real in terms of who you are when you're a girl and who you are when you're a guy. And this is who you are. And like, this is how most guys are. Like, they don't censor themselves when they're with their buddies doing whatever. Like, they say whatever they want. And this is going to make you very relatable. And because it went back to, and that was, again, like the original intention on why Janae entrusted me to do the doc was because of those conversations. So it was like, you're right. Okay, I agree. Let's do it. This is where rubber hits the road, and you have to kind of live up to what you said you wanted to make. And it's like, and that scene ended up resonating with a lot of people because they were like, I love that scene when, she wasn't politically correct. It was like, people could relate to that. So, I think that is something filmmakers need to spend, time on their own, walking away, watching movies, thinking about where they're at in their career. What do I want to make? What's the right thing to do? What do I want to do? Like, you have to be honest with yourself. What do you really want to do with this project? Because there's never one answer. Like, I've had to make compromises, with Janae. There were things we weren't allowed to talk about. There were kind of rules that she put out there for us. With His Name is Ray, there was no holds bar. I mean, he was just like, show whatever the fuck you want. I don't care. Like, I want this. I want you to show how I got here, and it was a completely different thing when you work on a commercial, like a branded content film,
like
right?
You are right now.
Yeah. There's rules, the company that's funding it, we can show certain things, we can't show other things, like, no problem. It's like, so it's not a good, it's just what it is. It's just the rules of the game. And I think it's then being able to communicate that to the character and say, this is what we're doing. Here's the game. Yeah. This is what we're doing. This is how we're playing. This is, what we can do. This is where, let's see how far we can go here. We can't cross this line or whatever. We can't show this. But, I think that you got to put time into that thought. Yeah. And because that ultimately becomes the process of making the film.
Without having too much vulnerability hangover, I've found a big part of my filmmaking experience is also opening up to my characters, because you're daily requiring them to kind of sometimes go to the depths of their hearts and minds and talk like, hey, what about this in your childhood? So I found, even on the CBUM film, sometimes just opening up to some stuff that I haven't told people about that often to Chris and Courtney, and like being like, I find this relatable. Here's what happened in my life. And that built trust, because filmmaking inherently is taking, like, you're writing data, you're recording an image. And I find, like, I'm having to ask myself as a filmmaker, like, what am I giving back? How am I benefiting their lives? And it's not that I'm like coming in with gifts and all this, but is there times that I'm just putting the camera down and having an enriched conversation, or bringing some joy into their lives. And so, yeah, you have to be thinking about what is my character looking to get out of this film as well, and not that you have to prioritize that in all moments.
No, you should know that.
But should know that.
You should, if you don't want, you don't want it to be a one way. I think it's a good conversation. Like it's a balance, because you don't want to make something diluted, to the point that it's just making them look good.
It's a fluff piece.
Yeah, like it's, I don't think that benefits them. I don't think that unless it's just trying to appeal to like a fan base or to like their family and friends, like people who love them and just want to say like how great it is.
And you got to think, do you want to make that film? And that's usually a film you don't want to make.
Yeah. So it is a, obviously anybody who wants to put themselves on camera has their reasons to do it, because it's not necessarily, it shouldn't be a, it's kind of becoming a bit of a glamorous, people like being on camera or the attention or whatever. But, depending on what you're making, I think I find it's important to be clear to them that, I get where your comfort level is. We might push it a bit. Yeah. How we do that, like you said, you can open up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I don't know. I find it's a tricky thing that I'm always trying to face, because I want to make it as dramatic as possible.
Yeah.
Like it's a movie. I want it to be as entertaining as possible.
Yeah.
Like I want them to say their crazy thoughts. Like I want them to, I don't want them to be polished, because I want them to be, I'm more interested in characters who, are rough around the edges. Like
Absolutely.
they're not, it's not edited. Like it's, you can show the scene, you can show a 1 minute version of any moment of their day, and it's interesting.
Yeah.
Like that's what I'm always kind of trying to look for. It's like, this is, just you are what you are. I'm going back to this. I'm thinking about this because I got to represent this script that I'm working on, this short doc. And, I wrote the character about a kind of a lonely 82-year-old man. He's been fishing this certain fish his whole life. And one of the comments was by, the agency, the producers, was, I just don't want him to feel too a loner.
Isolated. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like, and we had to talk about it for a while. These are like conversations. It's like, he is though. I mean, this is who, and it's like, you just have to, it takes time. You can't just say he is, like, you have to navigate those conversations and like say, yeah, I get it. I'm not out to try to make him look bad. I think it's enviable. Like he's given his whole life to doing this thing, and he's lost 3 marriages over doing this. I'm maybe not enviable about that, but it's, it's enviable when someone finds what they want to do more than anything else. That's all they think and dream of. They literally dream about that thing and obsess about it. That's that, and there's sacrifices to that. Why can't we just say that?
Yeah.
That's the truth. Like there's real sacrifices that come to being fully obsessed with something. And it's like when and that's a good thing. I think it's when you start being able to talk, like, just paint it not as like I'm trying to show something, negative for the sake of being exploitative or anything like that, but because it's the true story of who they are. And that's, I think you're being more manipulative if you don't do that. Like, I think you are manipulating their story if you try to, what do we want to set up scenes where they're in a social world? Like, that's not him.
No.
That's like, what are we doing? And so I think that's where, you want to be careful what projects you take on for that reason. You want to make sure, whether it's for a client, whether it's for a passion project, that just everybody's in line with what you're doing.
Yeah.
I think if everybody has kind of a watered down version, it's like, or they want to say they want to make something special, but then they're not willing to, they're only willing to go this far or able to do this, then I find then you're going to end up with not the best product in the end.
I think we talk about this in AOD, and it's the gauntlet to determine if you want to have the right story. It's like, and one of the main things is your character passionate? And just hearing you say that, I'm going back to all my films, and I think of the projects that were my best is when I had a character who is so dedicated. Like this CBUM film is going to be one of my best projects. Chris has dedicated his whole life to winning the 6th title, to being the best bodybuilder in the world. Riscate. Ronaldo dedicated his life to saving lives. It's like, you think of Ray, and unfortunately dedicated his life to this drug. It's like, these are characters who are passionate about one thing. I think of like maybe I don't know, I worked on a commercial once, and the person who was supposed to complete the final thing in the commercial, we had hired an artist. They weren't passionate. They were literally asked to leave early, and I had to finish their paint. I'm not an artist. I was finished because they're like, oh, my girlfriend, she's taking me to this concert, and I got to leave early. And I'm looking at this artist. I'm like, you got to stay. Like, they weren't passionate. And the final piece that this film culminated to, it was underwhelming. It was like, and it's like, you have to, or for me, and I think, and I know you as well, absolutely, because I've watched you walk away from projects where you felt like the main character wasn't passionate. If your character isn't passionate about something, then you're going to be making up problems that they have to face. Like, we kind of had that with No Country is an Island, where we come 6 months after everything had happened, so the emergency wasn't as pertinent. So our characters, like, they did a great job of going out and giving the aid, but it didn't have that kinetic energy of the immediacy.
Well, the antagonist isn't there. It's like what's antagonizing your character.
Yeah.
Right. And even in documentary, there needs to be a strong antagonizer. So in this short branded piece I'm doing, it's age. Like, the guy's 82. The antagonist is age. Yeah. Like, he's gonna die soon. Right. Whatever. He might have a few more trips left.
Yeah.
But he's got a bum shoulder. He's had cancer. He's had all these issues. And it's like, listen, what's our antagonist? It's like, he's on a ticking time. Like, it's almost the end, right?
Your antagonist doesn't have to be a person.
No.
It rarely is in a documentary.
No, it needs to. No, in a lot of times in documentaries, it's not.
No, exactly.
Right? I just watched, because of this project I'm going down to do, this making of kind of this film. I'll talk about it later, but I had to watch Heart of Darkness, which was about the making of
Werner
Apocalypse.
Herzog.
No, Apocalypse Now.
Sorry, I'm thinking. What's the one with Werner Herzog where he shows the Fitzgerald or whatever his name, when they're taking that boat through the...
I can't remember.
It's a film. Landon, can you look it up? Landon's our who's the guy on Rogan? Jamie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Landon, look at that up. It's Werner Herzog. He made a film about them trying to take this steam. He made a film about a film, but them taking the steamboat through the Amazon. Anyways, he'll pull that up in a sec.
I can't remember.
Thanks, Jamie.
It's not Apocalypse Now.
No, but Heart's Darkness was about the making of Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, I was thinking about, I'm going down to do this project, and I was thinking about other films, documentaries that have been made about films being made. And the best one of all time was Heart of Darkness, where they, was about Francis Coppola's Apocalypse Now. And, it's everybody needs to watch. Anyone interested in making documentaries has to watch Heart of Darkness, not just to see a great documentary, but to see, Francis Coppola. That's a certain style of filmmaker. He, putting up his house and putting up all his money, and like everything's on the line on that. Yeah. But it's the kind of thing where, not every project you do might need to be at that level. I mean, that's a monumental film. But as someone now, as I get older, 2 kids, family, and it's like, I can only go on so few projects. It's like, I better have some deep passion or reason to do this. Like, that's got to come from a few places. It's got to come from what you said, the character. Like, I have to believe. It's like, to get off the bench for me to play, it's like, I have to believe in the character. I have to believe in myself. I got to believe in the story so much. Right. And it's like, I don't know. I watched that movie the other day again, Heart of Darkness, and I'm just like, man, nothing. You couldn't shoot any part of that film without it being great. Like, every moment is high stakes. Yeah. It's all high stakes and super high reward if it works out, and it does. But I think that to me is for, young filmmakers, whether they're an AOD or whatnot. It's like, if you're not, it's very difficult to get the audience excited about a character if you're not excited about the character.
Absolutely.
Like, you can't,
Absolutely.
you could make a mediocre film out of a very boring character if you're a great filmmaker.
Yeah.
But if you want to do something special, you got to find someone special, I believe. Like,
and you have to find what you think is special about them. If you're finding them disinterested, you have to work a little bit harder to find what is different about this person. Like, don't just settle at the surface.
And it's got to be, resonating with you. Like, whatever, project comes your way, we've talked about this before. You would tell it differently than I would, than Landon would, than anybody would. Like everyone would approach it differently and find a different theme. Take for instance this fishing one.
Yeah.
Someone might come into it and look at more of a conservation element, that this fish is being taken out of these lakes. It's a big danger. Someone else might look at it as the marriages are breaking down, whatever, like some family component that, for me, the thing that there's just something, you have to find something that you're like that I'm thinking about all the time.
Like, and be okay with that. Like your film doesn't have to be about every aspect of the character.
You can touch on lots of aspects, but I think at the end of the day, you need, as a director, if there's any advice I can give to young directors, like you need to have the vision. You need to hold the vision. You need to hold those themes tightly so that you can convey them to every single person throughout the project. The character themselves, any crew you bring on. When it comes time to submit to festivals or distributors, you're going to start with those ideas. Like you're going to be like this, it's like, this film, like his name is Ray. It's not an opioid fentanyl film. Like there's, this is about pulling over on the road and being on the streets for 8 months with this guy and experience life on the streets. It's like, it's a very clear idea on what it is. And that has to come from the filmmaker.
And I think for you as a filmmaker or anyone, you have to look at what hasn't been told about this. And I think
that's part of it, for sure.
There's been so much in terms of the opioid and fentanyl crisis that's been around, safe injection or how do we leave these people on the street? Do we put them in shelters? How do you navigate like all the political side of things? And I appreciated that you didn't put experts in your film. You just said, I'm very interested about Ray. I pulled my car over one day. I looked him in the eyes and said, I want to know more about this person. And I think as a filmmaker, we've gone away from that sometimes. As a film can be about your curiosity and your journey into a world as a filmmaker and your perspective on that, and embrace that.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about, it's crazy that people get even the slightest bit afraid that AI could take over filmmaking because it's so absurd in my opinion. I would never watch a film made by AI. I'll watch one maybe just to see it, but I'll never watch it again because I'm barely interested in the film. Like I'm interested in the film, but I'm most interested, I think most people are often in the filmmaker. They might not know it, but it's like you start learning about the filmmaker and why they approach this topic of whatever, World War II, Schindler's List, or whether it's Dunkirk and Christopher Nolan. Like they approach Saving Private Ryan, Steven Spielberg. It's like they approach these films from very different vantage points. And I'm interested in terms of why the story's told from that person for that reason. Right. And I think, that can't be stressed enough for young filmmakers, is that you need to spend time thinking about, why am I telling this? Like, and it's not an easy question you answer overnight. It's something like you often, for me, on every film I've ever done, it's often watching for whatever reason. There's life experience in it, but it's often watching a lot of other films and being like, they've made this opioid film or they've made this drug film, but I want to see the Tree of Life or Florida Project version of a homeless film. That's what his name was. Ray was supposed to be, right? It was like I think this honestly comes, Mark, like when I didn't do a PhD. I did like my when I was doing my master's, but I remember getting prepared to do a PhD, and it was like I was talking to my advisors and they're like, what is academia? And it's like when you get to studies at the highest level, studies are ultimately, you are trying to add to the conversation that's taking place, whether that's in medicine, whether that's in philosophy. You come in studying whatever you do in your underground, in your master's, and you add into the conversation of academia, right? And I find cinema should be the same thing. It's like you're watching all the films you love, and then you get presented with CBUM, and you're going to be putting in whatever influences of films you've been watching that, that gets kind of woven into, your style, your emphasis on that project. And to me, that's what, that's the importance of filmmakers spending time, or young filmmakers either watching films, reading books, spending time in the world, because it's impossible not to bring wherever you're at in life into your projects. And it's easy for us to tell. I think we watch a lot of one day docs, and it's very easy for me to tell which filmmakers are probably just, only listening to kind of stock music playlists, only watching Vimeo like kind of traditional,
or their favorite YouTuber or whatever.
yeah, you can see where the film has come from.
Totally.
And so I think that to me is always the challenge on every project, is just, spending that time, watching movies and just
consuming other art too. Like
whatever you like.
There's been, I'm so glad this time last year I went to Europe and I just decided for a couple of days to turn off my phone and go to art galleries. And I saw so much representation of historical masculinity and all these carvings, and like even I remember this one, it was this piece of ivory, like a big tusk, like you could tell it's two tusks, and they cut right down the middle, and they created, it's like the 10th century. And it was, people were illiterate back then. So they had the whole story of Jesus in the Bible carved out of ivory. And wow. I can remember one thing that just stuck out to me then is, even in that, the thing is about this big, and it has like 12 strips of like from his birth to his death. And I remember at one point looking at that and I laughed. I was like, man, even in this tiny ivory carvings, they still gave Jesus a 6-pack. Like, it's like still like, and that was just an observation I had, but that carried through all the way to the CBUM film where funny. I was like, it's began thinking, and I want to shoot some sequences with some statues, and when I was in Germany filming with Urs, one of the competitors, which has been really fun, we got to film all the top bodybuilders in the world. I'm looking at these in Germany, there's still these buildings from, 1700s, and they all have these gargoyles or centurions and just like these warriors up there. And I'm like, man, men, or maybe women too, but humanity will say has always had a fascination with muscles, with sinew, with a representation of strength. And I don't know how that's all going to weave into the film yet. I have had some ideas, but I want to get into the edit before I just impose such an artistic style, because that might be so disjointed from the film. But all that to say, consuming art and being aware and thinking about what you're looking at around you will influence your filmmaking. And I think references, I've always kind of pulled away. I always had this pride for a long time of like, I don't watch much film. Like, I'm a filmmaker and I take my perspectives from the world, which is good. But references have been so helpful in the film, because Chris came to us for this film, Chris Bumstead, and was like, I love The Last Dance. And so I was like, okay, I don't want to deviate. I want to deviate away from that, because there's areas that I would like to change. But it's good to know what he likes in film.
Would that be a big influence on this one?
I am, in the sense, I stylistically no, but storytelling yes, where there is a reference to a history of leading up to a championship. That's The Last Dance, even in the expression. This is Chris's, like, we were playing around with titles at one point, like The Last Flex. Like, we're not going to use that, thank God. But like the idea that was Chris's, like, he's retired. He retired on stage, and this was his last opportunity. So it was like there needs to be a nostalgic feel to some of this. But then I thought of Hoop Dreams, and I thought of Pumping Iron. Pumping Iron just had beautiful observational content of bodybuilding, and that was so fun. And there was a novelty back then in the 70s. People hadn't seen that. So you have to recognize sometimes older references worked because people hadn't seen that yet. There wasn't just doom scrolling back in the 70s. But you and I both appreciate older documentaries because there's a patience, and there was an intentionality with holding a shot and like just moving through an environment. But then Hoop Dreams was a huge reference for me as well, because Hoop Dreams was the filmmaker being present through a decade. And I have not been present, but Calvin, our AOD student, has been present in Chris's life for almost a decade, that we'll be able to pull on that content. But then I was like, I don't want to just, after the first episode, leave that style of filmmaking. I want to lean into that. So it slowly became, with Chris, being more and more present for his workouts and daily life. And but because Chris had some references and knew some films, we were able to talk a bit about this. And what's great is you have a reference. You can either inform your character, your crew, yourself, what you are doing or what you're not doing. Like, there's been I won't mention them, but there's been other documentaries that were released this year about other athletes and different things, CrossFit or whatever, and even bodybuilding. And we are able to look at those as a team and say, okay, they did that well, but they did this, this, and this that whether it's good or not, that's just an opinion, but we're like, we don't want to make it that way. So even just having a reference sometimes is good to say what you want to do, but also what you don't want to do. And that's been helpful, because while you're sitting there and recording, no one knows what you're making. You do. But unless you've had like a really strong director's Bible or like pitch deck. But even then I made these pitch decks and people like thumb through them.
Right.
And they don't necessarily translate. They kind of want to see a film. So
Yeah.
references to me, it can seem like simplistic just to be like, we're going to make this film in this world, but it is really helpful. And it's like at the end of every pitch deck, you just kind of say like, when we have our pitch deck for this film, it's just where this is The Last Dance meets Pumping Iron.
Right.
Just real simple, and people can immediately know those are two great films, and in this case, two great documentaries. And you're like, oh, this Chris Bumstead, like a powerful character like Michael Jordan, but then with the nostalgia and the verite of Pumping Iron, it's like you're like, oh yeah, that's gonna be awesome, you know. And so it's helped me then inform that.
That's awesome.
I really wanted to get into this podcast today, talking with you, because I actually genuinely want to know. You had the chance to take another doc series, potential doc series, or a concept that one of our students brought to us in the MMA world, and that's actually, side note, that's been so fun with Art of Documentary lately. And we're intentionally moving that way. Is now developing these ideas from our community, and even giving them chances to shoot films. Like our partnership with Sown. Sown's that amazing organization run by Jake, where they take 8 organizations, get a sponsor, and then find a filmmaker from, in this case, AOD, where
they're free docs, basically.
Giving free docs to these 8 organizations, but doing them in a way that has the intentionality that Jake brings from Sown of like, how do we actually have an impact? And, you know, their few films that Sown's done already have, or not few, I guess they've made almost a dozen, but they've raised over $3 million now for all the organizations. And then partnering with the art that we bring in an AOD and the intentionality of our filmmakers. They've gone through our system. They know how to find a good character, and we're building them together. We'll have just released, actually tomorrow, Landon, we got to release it'll already be live once this doc's out, but we're releasing the One Love tennis film with Jacob Cholula. It's just so cool seeing him as a filmmaker create that film, because he was one of my first subscribers ever.
Wow.
I don't even know how he found my YouTube channel, but he was so encouraging. And now it's just like a fun moment for me, because he was the first person outside of friends and family to be like, hey, I love your channel. Wow. And he was a real young filmmaker. And now here he is, and we're getting to produce a film that he's directing, and he crushed it. Yeah. You know, and what I really appreciated about Jakob is how well he took feedback. You know, it's like, if you can take feedback well, you don't have to do all the feedback, but if you can just be in a room and be easy to give feedback to, it's like people want to collaborate with you. I know you're laughing because it hasn't always been easy.
I'm not very good at it.
Yeah, I know. You have to, you've said it before, I think you said in the last podcast too, is you kind of have to separate your emotion from, and your identity from the feedback. Yeah. And then I think too, is just recognize is you don't have to do all feedback.
No, yeah.
Yeah, it's like every idea that someone brings, if in those creative meetings with Jakob on that film, you know, there was Jevin Dovey, me, you, Tad, Jake, we're all giving him advice. If Jakob did every piece of advice that we gave him, his film would suck, because that's 5 different visions. You know what I mean? Like, there is good pieces of feedback that we're all giving, but we can't do everyone's feedback at all times.
No, it ends up becoming like a shitty stew.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're going to have to navigate that on your branded doc piece, but you've had enough experience now. But just circling back, talking about developing these films, you had the chance to go to the Netflix headquarters, like literally walking through the door in LA. What was that like? What did you learn? I'm so curious.
It was a surreal experience, because I've never been there. I've had 2 films on Netflix and never corresponded with them once, other than I think given like a DCP on Transcend, because I was the editor, so I had to figure out how to do that. But never, you don't talk to these people because you have producers and distributors who do it all. So it was the first time, like, pulling into the gates and getting your badge.
What was the building even like?
It was nice. I mean, it's Netflix.
The giant N, and you walk through a little door at the bottom of the N.
You can Google it. It's on Sunset. It's kind of West Hollywood, and it's big. It's got the Netflix up top, across from the high school. Though it's pretty, underwhelming from the outside, but once you get in, it's beautiful. Like, it's got a huge, massive wall of, all the TVs, and then they've got a customized bubbly, you can make your own, the amount of carbonation you want and the amount of blueberry and, all these, the coffee machine. It's all kind of the touches.
Yeah. Things we don't have at the AOD office.
No, not yet. I was like, oh yeah, this is what
we have a fridge right now that's going too cold and it exploded like 50 bubblies because it's just freezing everything.
I was so nervous though. I didn't even have one. I was there.
Did you have dry mouth? I would,
not dry mouth. I was anxious.
Yeah.
Not anxious. Like
that's exciting though.
Yeah. I was like, it was like a race. It was like, let's go. Like I didn't want to mess around. Like I was excited. I'd prepared. I was ready for the pitch. Like, I just wanted to, it was like a race, like in a race, the most nerve wracking part for me always in the race was just the, building up to it. I got very nervous. I just wanted the gun to go and then we could go.
Yeah. I know that feeling. You're like people would do warm-ups. We both did long distance and I hated the warm-ups. I was like, just to start the race.
Yeah, I wasn't afraid of the pain of the race. It was always the pain or the, the anticipation of the gun going. That always made me nervous.
Interesting.
It was very similar feeling. I was there with two other producers who, have done a lot of, they've been in this situation pitching to big companies a lot more.
They were unfazed.
They were, yeah. Well, and they knew they were just going to introduce, they were going to introduce me and then you're up, Mike. Like, it's your pitch. I mean, we'll introduce you. And then they're like, this is why, it was John Kamen of Radical Media. He was introducing Derek, in France. And Derek had struck out with Netflix like 5 or 6 times.
Wow.
And I mean, if you know Derek's projects, it kind of makes sense. I mean, he's, he doesn't make that, he makes, very,
he's not going for commercial success necessarily.
Exactly.
They end up being commercially successful because they're so powerful.
Yeah. So I think like, it was John handed the baton to Derek handed it to me, and then I had to go. And it was two Netflix execs in the room. And it was, you just present,
just even break that down. You open your laptop, or you airplaying to a TV?
What did we do? John had actually landed, and you can throw me a book behind you. We had these books. We had these books made, but John didn't ended up giving one because they forgot to put our names on the bottom. So we ended up just sending these in. Did I have a laptop? Yeah, we did. I think John put his laptop on, and it was more or less this book just as a keynote. And it was, and we just went through that.
This is your whole, so people understand, this is your whole pitch deck.
This is the pitch deck made as a book.
It's kind of great.
It's beautiful. But
you know why that's great? Why you want to do that is the trick, and that sits on their desk.
Yes.
You can't. It's like an email. You can just close the tab.
Exactly.
A book you have to throw out, and when it's not nice, you struggle to throw that out. They're going to be thinking about it.
Exactly. So yeah, it wasn't. It's funny. I'm blanking on even the format. I think maybe John handed them. I just remember looking at their eyes. I don't remember reading from a book. I remember we did have something there, obviously, but I remember looking at them most of the time because I didn't want it just to be reading from the book. I wanted it to be a conversation. And John warned me, being like, they might not give you any reactions. Like, don't think that means it's not going well. That just means they're just, they're not supposed to give reactions in the room. So, but thankfully they were, asking questions. So it was more of a conversation, just going through, the big level idea, getting into the references, getting into the characters, the episodes. They had questions along the way. So that made it easier. Derek was chiming in, which helped a lot whenever he would jump in. But basically got to the end, and then we showed them the trailer. That was an interesting choice by John to show the trailer at the end. Typically, I would show it at the front to add context, and he's like, "No, let's save that for the end. I want to finish on a good note, like a stronger note," which I thought was interesting. I thought it worked. It was about an hour, which is very long, but
not the trailer, but the meeting.
Yeah, the meeting. Yeah, it's long. The meeting was an hour. Trailer was about 5 minutes, and we walked away feeling good. We knew that, Netflix was you should always look at the type of shows the people that you're pitching are currently producing. It's a good indicator on where they're at in their kind of current mandates. And they were doing, NASCAR, Formula One. They just come out with Beckham, PGA.
What's it called? The Dallas one, the
Dallas Cheer.
American Sweetheart. Yeah.
So it was, it was a lot of these big names, and I knew like that was going to be our challenge, is that even though it's it's in the very far shadow of the UFC world. It's still kids.
Would it be Untold? You know, they have their Untold series. Is that what you guys were going under?
No, I mean, it was just their sports.
Okay.
It was their sports department.
Yeah.
But yeah, unfortunately, they loved it. Said they were going to talk it over with the team. And then a week later, they got back to John saying they're going to pass because they're focused on franchise projects.
Wow.
And, I was very,
what was that like for you? You know, I think a lot of people have to face rejection.
I don't know if Netflix watches this, but it's frustrating. But at the same time, it's like this, Netflix is not making Last Chance U anymore.
No,
like I'm very disappointed by them. I wish they would. Like their documentary content in my mind used to be a lot better. We had Curran Sheldon speak to us a little while ago. He had a doc picked up by them 2016 called Heroin, which was phenomenal. They're not making those kind of shows anymore.
No,
they're not making Last Chance U. They're not,
I can barely get through their doc series now.
Yeah. They're obviously making a business decision based off of numbers, just as I think McDonald's makes business decisions for numbers. Like more people in America eat fast food than eat wholesome, good, original cooking, and I think Netflix is making that decision to go, where can we get the most viewers?
Yeah.
And all the power to them. It's their business. They can do what they want. I'm disappointed as a lover of great content, as a lover of a lot of their, I fell in love with a lot of their documentary shows in the, 2000 teens.
Yeah.
And it just, that to me was the disappointed. I'm not surprised, but it's disappointing, not just for myself, but, for other projects like this that would be going through the pipeline there that are being rejected. I hope they have a change of heart.
Yeah. I think you can't necessarily fault them all the time, in the sense that because I've been thinking about it, and it was this one producer told me that Netflix talks about the second screen, like can someone watch this with a second screen? And so I think a lot of the content, because you're looking at a lot of the docs on these streamers. I even watched something on Amazon Prime about the NHL, and it's just reality TV. It's just an interview, B-roll, and like some salacious moments, and I don't want to criticize the filmmaking, because it's like, again, that's a different dish that people like. It's like, I can't say it's just not my taste. And to me, it's essentially reality TV now. But why I'm like, you can't fault them is they're having to create content that people will keep playing. And when Netflix added in the 2x speed option on Netflix, I realized, I was like, oh, this is no longer an event. Like, people now, and
it's a visual podcast.
I remember hearing a communicator once to say, like, it was like in a TED Talk or something, saying like, you've become, you've gone down the road of ADD when you can't watch a movie without opening your phone up. Like, and essentially we all have some level of ADD now. Like, we're all attention, like we can't focus on one thing. And I think that's what Netflix has had to create, these shows that recap, that have people talking about the plot. Like, that was even what the producer says, is that every 7 minutes you had to reinstate the plot. This is actually what our writer, who we brought on for the beginning of the CBUM film, was what he was saying is because he works in TV and on some of these streamers, is that you have to reiterate, you have to have someone almost saying the plot, being like, we need to do this today because of this, every 7 minutes, because that's like kind of
nauseating.
Yeah. And it's, people are on their phone and they're looking up like, what's happening again with this? And so in a way, it's like TikTok and everything has trained us to look that way. So that's where I'm like, I almost can't fault Netflix, because they have all the data, and they probably looked at these auteur films that we like, and they've just been like, people aren't paying attention. It doesn't
need to be auteur films. I mean, it's like, even again, going back, if you haven't seen, the first 2 or 3 seasons of Last Chance U, it's like, go and watch it.
First season's just untouchable.
And I'm just like, why wouldn't she keep making this? It really, it blows. They're not even in the same world in terms of like a Last Chance U and a Formula One or like,
or no, it's the worst right now. What's the Mormon one? The
NASCAR?
real, no, the worst doc right now. I think it's on Netflix. It's like the real lives of this.
I don't know,
Atlanta. What is it? The Salt. You can just call it out. The Salt Lake City wives, or the real lives of the Mormons.
Geez. Well, I mean, that's reality TV. I mean, that's reality TV, but I'm saying like even their doc series, their doc series are basically reality TV now, where it's like, it's just these competition shows where it's like, person A is going to get to the rank. Like, you got to qualify, you got to beat this guy. Everything's on the line. Crew's doing that. And it's just like, you just, they're not for,
cut the slow motion B-roll.
they cut slow motion B-roll, big music, and then it's one shot one shot inside the home with the wife, and it's like, okay, babe, I'll see you later, and then they're back out. I'm like, I don't, I guess I can't even compare the two in terms of filmmaking quality, and it's like. So I guess that, that leads to the question, like, what do you do with a thing like Fight Kid? What are you supposed to do if you want to make this?
Yeah.
I think that's where, I'm at currently, is just trying to figure out, on Ray's like that. I mean, we just released it on YouTube. I would never have imagined that that's where it would have ended up after, all my films fortunate enough to make it on streamers, and it's like, well, that's on YouTube now. But it's like, it was on, I talked to distributor after distributor being like, this is a phenomenal film, I'm just telling you straight up, I cannot get you a home for this, like, not the one it deserves. We got in touch with some big distributors, love the film, they're just, we're not going to be able to sell this for you. And it's just like, okay, that's where you're at. And so I don't know. It's been giving me a lot to think about, even with Fight Kids, thinking about, whether you stick to this format, look at a different format with it. Ultimately you want your work to be seen. To me, that's, you want to be able to make it. You want to be able to make it the way, like, the best you can, and you want it to be seen. So that's where we're at. What does that look like now? Doesn't necessarily, I don't know. Does it mean festival? Does it mean, HBO Max? I don't know. It's like, things have changed so much that, I hold less stock in, where necessarily it ends up. As opposed, I don't know. I think people are getting smarter. Like, in one way, you see the type of content, you think people are getting dumber, but I also think, I have faith, I guess, thinking that people are getting smarter. They'll be able to decipher, even if it's on YouTube or somewhere else, like, they'll be able to decipher whether it's a good film or not. Whether it's,
I don't know. I try to look at indications of other areas of life that have gone through huge evolutions and huge revolutions. Think of our food. It's like, I don't think we are necessarily as nutrient, our food wasn't as nutrient dense years ago, but you hear people talking about paleo being like the caveman diet, like eating essentially, you look back like 100 years ago, people were eating perhaps a little bit cleaner is the theory, that there was less like seed oils or whatever, all this stuff. But we've come back around then in the evolution of that. It's like, we got really unhealthy, but now you see people trying to bring back levels of health and restaurants simplifying. So it's like, I wonder if film will go through that.
It will.
We're in a fast food moment.
100%. Like, I'm 100% AI would not take over.
No.
It's impossible. And whether that means it takes a share out of the film industry, sure.
It could do a kid's show.
It might be able to make whatever. It might be able to make Avengers.
But maybe not even.
It might be able to make, there's no doubt.
No doubt it can make Avengers.
There's no doubt it can make movies. Like, of course it can make movies. Of course it can make movies fast, but I don't think that's the point. Just like, cooking, yes, you can get all your nutrients from supplements, but you still want like a good cooked meal. Like, I think ultimately humans aren't going to eat that porridge you see from The Matrix. I don't know, there's a scene in The Matrix where it's he goes, what is this? It has all the vitamins and nutrients we need. This is all, and it's like, I don't believe humans will get to that point, because we still have taste buds. I do too. I like, because I know I do. It's like, I still know that when a certain filmmaker, when Sean Baker comes out with Anora, like his latest film, I'm just like, I cannot wait to see this thing. Like, and I think it'll just carve out, maybe it gets smaller, but in a way, maybe it'll become more meaningful. Because, it's kind of like not the last stand, but it means, it's just the way, like, how we really, you see it. I mean, there's a resurgence of people using film, and we really appreciate people try to shoot on 16 mil or 35, whatever they're shooting on. Like, it's like, we really appreciate that. And I think there's still going to be true appreciation for someone who doesn't just press a button.
I think it just becomes what people prioritize. You think of cars, at one point they were all not handmade, but heavier, like way better built. My dad always tells this story in the 60s. You remember seeing a fender bender in a parking lot at a grocery store in Toronto, and they both just came up and looked at their bumpers, and they're like, "Yeah, you're good."
They're so strong.
But now it's like, you would fender bender, you're like, you're done. Like, the car's impact. But there still is people right now who want a well-built car, either want to restore an old one or there's certain companies that will put out something. And I think with film, it's just like that's going to niche down. But those communities become much more intense and connected and appreciative.
Listen, it'll change a bit of a crazy system.
Yeah.
The filmmaking world was a crazy system.
Yes.
Millions and millions. Like the Hollywood.
It was gate kept as well.
Yeah, because the cost of the theaters and everything was crazy. Like the budgets, it was all wild. You don't need $50 million to make a film. Like, I mean, you just don't.
No.
I mean, Leo, all the, like, there will be it's just going to change. Like, you can make a film for $1 million. Like, there's no reason you can't make a profitable film for $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, it will change. I think it's just going to change. It's going to be a different system where it's not like we need to make this film here and make hundreds of millions. I think the studios might be in for, you know, a rude awakening, but I think indie filmmaking, you know, the passion that drives it, same with documentaries, isn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
And, you know, people value, you see it all the time. Like, people still value the actual craft that goes into it, as opposed to knowing that this thing was made, whether it's a Netflix show made by, as you said, it's like 7 minutes, this comes in, you know, put story plot here, do this here. It's like, we value the craft still.
Yes.
And I think it's just how that will ultimately turn into a business model is what will be curious. Like, it has to be still, you know, it's still art and commerce. So there's still going to be some business side with it. And that's what I'm interested in. You know, Fight Kids, it would have been nice to get, you know, whatever, $1.5 million an episode, just because you can make a nice living and not have to worry about work for a while. But I still love the story. I still love the kid Isaiah. I still love his dad. It's like, I still love these characters, and I'll figure out something to do with them. It's just going to look different.
I think everything goes through. To believe that the craft, like paintings, like I think just everything, culinary arts, everything changes. The way we make roads, it's like, so just to always like lean in on the good old days. I think it's an exciting opportunity as an artist to be like, how has things changed, but how can I still see my vision through? And I wonder that even for us at Art of Documentary, we're now in our 4th year. We built this off of teaching videos. Yeah. And that's been huge, and that's still a big part of our community, and people love that. We're up to like 350 now videos, you know, like, it's like, and we're wanting to create that producing course that we've got. I was really surprised. Actually, that really made me excited about our community when I put that poll up on Facebook, and you had thoughts about it right away, but we was like, do you guys want us to make a content creation course or a producing course? And producing course would be like how to be a creative producer, how to see someone else's vision through, how to get funding. And it was like 70% of or maybe not that high, but it was
awesome.
over half. I was like, oh, cool. Our community still wants to make meaningful content, and they almost kind of were like, I'll just make the TikTok however I need to. That got me really excited. But I've been thinking about it where I'm like, you know, they say like evolve or die. Even though, well, I probably have a perspective that there is a creator plus evolution, but I don't know. The evolution stuff doesn't seem to be all adding up. But to use that term though, evolve or die, I think not worry, but I'm like, okay, how in Art of Documentary are we evolving this community? And it's like, I think that's what's been so exciting about opportunities with Sown, and how I crewed up this entire film with our AOD students. It's like, there's a path forward to us not just being a community of education, but a community of opportunity. And so I'm like, what content, what structures can we make? How can we continue that when someone joins AOD, they have, because our community is grown, right? They've had 4 years of this education. They've had 4 years of one-day doc competitions, 4 years of making their own content and out there learning. I'm not just saying we're the only place that they learn. So it's like, okay, everyone's ready for the opportunity. You know, I'm starting to feel it, like people like Jakob, who were just like a kid picking up a camera for the first time. Now we're producing his films. It's like, so how as a community are we going to be providing that opportunity and do it in a way that we have capacity to?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think every film project is, for me, the exciting thing with it is they all require a different strategy. And I think there's, you know, as you get older in life, you start realizing that like nothing good in life is easy. I don't believe, like, almost like everything good worth doing in life takes work.
Yeah.
Like it is. Like, you know, if there's a shortcut, it's probably not the right thing. Like it's usually the long way to go. It's usually the harder. It's usually being more disciplined. Like it's usually, you know, being more thorough in your writing. Like it's usually not pressing simple buttons to get like, and so I think in AOD, what I love about our students is I think a lot of them believe that. Like we don't have students coming in looking, they want help and guidance to figure out what that routine is, like what that, but it's not a promise saying, you know, press these buttons, you know, end up in this place, get this much money. Yeah. It's like, no, it's not that. Like each one is going to be,
everyone's career is different.
Our success stories in the Facebook group as well. I was just looking this morning, but, this guy, Christopher Larson, you know, it's like you're talking multiple years journeys to figure this stuff out, to have like a real career, have a family, like make something meaningful, balance work, balance creative, Ben Massey. It's like a lot of guys, Jakob, similar thing. It's like it takes time to figure out your path. Yeah. It's not like content creator, offer this retainer, this and that. Like it's not.
I can get you a couple bucks for a temporary time, but that's not a permanent solution.
It's going to take years of discovery, and that to me is what I'm most proud of with AOD. Like AOD is that place where to do that process. Yeah, it's like you know, don't kid yourself thinking you can do that process on your own. You can, but it's going to take a lot longer. And that to me is kind of my favorite part of AOD is, and that's how I've been selling it whenever we do our launches, is saying like, this is a place for you to fail. Like this is a place for you for you to fall down and make some bad films, you know, mess up some pitches, but then figure out what you did wrong and work on that for the next several years.
Exactly.
That's where you're going to start noticing real progress.
Now, that's where I want to, and we can take this offline, but talk about AOD Pro, like having that model for people who want that extra in like mentorship or extra. That is something that I know not everyone wants that, but I think some people desire that and need that. And
you do need it. If you can't find it organically, you know, like if you're not in a place where you have organic friends or colleagues that you can talk to about this stuff, you know, you need to find it somehow. Yeah. So happy to, you know, figure that out.
Well, we will. I think that's what's been so promising for me is that I get onto a film like CBUM, and what I want to tell our students, why I like doing these podcasts, is we can be so honest. Is like I get onto that film with Chris Bumstead, and I realize I'm like, man, I still have so much to learn. Like there's just there's moments where I once one of our students on the film, I think it was Danny, asked me, he's like, do you ever like? He's like, you seem so certain of filmmaking, like, and I laughed. I was like, no, there's been moments on this project I'm like, am I a filmmaker? Like, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? Like, I'm like, am I a good director? Like, it's okay to ask those questions. And I think it's okay to ask that because it comes back around to you admitting you don't know everything, which is then you're like, okay, so there is a solution. I just don't know it yet. It's not that I'm a failure. It's that I just don't know the solution yet, is how I've had to kind of been my internal mantra, or not my internal mantra, but just the way I'll navigate that. But I also think why I'm like, oh, this is good to feel this, because I know when we create our teaching videos, we seem so certain on everything, but we're talking from experience. And I think it's important to talk from a place of being like, yeah, every project, you don't know where it's going. Like, I think it was David Fincher in the midst of, I think it was the first Alien, but no, that was Ridley Scott. But it was, I'm almost positive it was Fincher. He, after had such a tough time with the studio, that he was like, I think I'm going to quit filmmaking. And that's how I felt in that Nikon series, where we were in 10 countries. It was like a $2.5 million budget. And I was thrown into the deep end. I was like a guy who just shot Riscate by himself. And the next thing I know, I have a crew of, like, in some cases, like literally three bus loads following me around in Scotland. Well, and then they give me a Nikon camera and I look back and there's this like amphitheater of producers and executives and or like agency people. And they're like, make a documentary. And I remember just like really struggling to make what I normally make, because I was trying to play their game, but then also try to find my feet. And it's like, I remember coming out of that project just being like, oh, like, I don't know if I'm good at filmmaking. Like I didn't create anything I liked. And I think that's so important to just, I keep a note on my phone of what I'm learning as I'm going. And I have this whole list from the CBUM film, because I think it's okay to be struggling. It's okay to be doubting. I guess it's just not okay to believe that's the end. Yeah. Like you're kind of in the, I think I'm always reminding myself I'm in the middle of my career. Like I'm always working this out.
I mean, you're at the beginning. I mean, I don't know. I'd still say I'm at the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you just do the math.
Yeah.
if you're going to like 60s or 70s or later, it's like this is definitely the first chapter. It's not
still just in middle,
maybe chapter
30s.
2, but it's not, you're not halfway through the book. That's for sure. Like,
No.
Yeah, I think that's all,
What have you been learning right now?
I think I'm at a bit of a crossroads with, doing docs for 12 years. Just, really, there's aspects of documentary filmmaking I love and aspects that I'm tired of.
Yeah, such as?
Well, I'm tired. It's very difficult. A couple things that I love are obviously the authenticity. Like I love that you don't need an art director, that you don't need a script. Like documentaries, it's real people, real locations, real words. You can't mess any of that up.
Yeah.
So if you find the right thing, it looks and feels real, like cinema.
Yeah.
The hard part, the challenge, is dramatization. That's a big challenge for me, is being able just to push the characters a little bit over the edge.
What do you mean by that?
Well, just making it more dramatic, making it more extreme, without pushing them outside of real life.
Yeah.
Like there's things I would love my characters to do. They will tell me a story of something exciting they did, and it's like, oh, I want to see that. I don't want to just see you make pancakes or whatever. It's like, I want to see, like, I want to make a movie.
Yeah.
And it's like, so some of that stuff you can't do. And it frustrates me because I'm like, oh, why don't I just make a movie?
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't I just turn this into a movie? Because then you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And as well as endings. Like endings in documentaries, the most important things are beginnings and endings in your movies. And endings are just really tough.
They're often a bit underwhelming in docs.
They're often underwhelming.
You just run out of money, and so you have to end somewhere and have some internal change.
Yeah, it's often underwhelming, and it's often, how do I get there appropriately?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where obviously having a script, before you get out there, you've got a great story. And listen, that's ironically, that's still what I love about docs. I still love the uncertainty on where it's going to go, but after doing it for so long, that to me has just like been a challenge. Not a challenge, just being like, I'd love to just try something. I'd love to know exactly where I'm going at the start, because it's these projects I work on, they take years. I mean, his name is Ray. I met him almost 7 years ago, and it just was released. It's a long time. Clear Sky, I'm probably going to go back into the editing room a little bit just to work on it. And we met him in 2019, I believe. So it's we're at 5 years there. So it's going to be another 6 years from the time it starts to when it's out. It's a long time, and a lot of that has to do with allowing.
You're just more patient. I would just put it on YouTube by now. That's what I would do. You're way more patient than me in that way.
I'm stubborn, I guess, a little bit on feeling. I don't know. These things are important. There are people's lives that are important to make sure you're doing it properly for the character, their family. You want it to be as artistically intelligent as possible. Like you want it to mean something. You want everything to. You want it to be there for 20 years. For me, it is that timeless component. Like I still want to be able to watch this in 20 years and be like, there was nothing else influence in this but the truth. Like, there was nothing else that made my decisions other than like what was true and real. Like there was no smoke and mirrors. There was no facade. Like this was the guy, this was their struggle, this was their journey. That's what we told, and it's like, that's what I love to do with docs. Again, I just find the challenge sometimes is it can take a long time to get there.
Talking about Clear Sky, it was very clear when we both first met him. We remember us looking at each other. He walked out, and he was just like, he was one of those people who, he's not faking who he is. We looked at each other and we're like, what an amazing guy. Like, that's the kind of person you want to make a film about. But, the first scene in that film punches you in the gut. You're watching someone in the midst of a wrestle with addiction, and, like you were there doing coke, and it's like, how do you, is it just your choice of character, or how are you as a filmmaker approaching your craft so that you're actually getting these authentic scenes? Because I think a lot of people will be like, whoa, how do I get in the room with someone who's in the midst of an addiction, doing drugs, and wants to journey with me?
It's the choice of the character.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you've got to and that's just the kind of character. Everyone's going to be drawn to different characters, and there's no right or wrong answer. I mean, it's whoever you're most drawn to. I think, all the characters I've worked with so far have been men in the middle of their lives. Generally between 30 to 40, they've all been confronting some question in the middle of their life. And, it's basically putting their entire past life experience at stake. They're confronting something. All the choices they've made have gotten them there, and now they have to decide, where do I go from here?
Yeah.
So it's like, if I look at a common trend on every one of my films, that's the common thread. And I think it's not just that they are in that place in life, but because I have had other characters it hasn't worked out with who are similar in that time that I like as a character in that middle part of their life. But they're not willing or able to, they don't have the courage. The characters I've always worked with have the courage. I just believe they have courage to go to that place in life that a lot of people aren't willing to go to. So if you're in a bad marriage and, you're just going to sit in it and you're just going to be miserable and you're going to allow it to just make you a bad person, there's some people who have the courage to like fight back and beat that thing that's beating them. Like those
not the human, but the problem.
Yeah, beat that problem,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, I think of all my characters, I'm always drawn to people who I believe it's like, you've got a chance. Like, I believe you've got it. I see I see you're in a dark place or you're in a struggle, but you've got the courage to beat this thing. And that to me has always kind of been my North Star with characters is, I don't think that's, this guy I'm working with now, he's 82. But in the first several films, I think that was a draw for finding characters, was just, because you want to believe as a filmmaker that something could happen while you're making the film. I don't want nothing to happen. Like, I don't want to just talk about the past. Like, I want to believe that it's like Christopher Columbus. Like, I want to believe you're going to take me somewhere unexpected and wild.
Yeah.
Like, I got to believe that you're willing to do that and able to do that and are going to do that.
Yeah.
So it is a bit of an instinct thing, I think, where it's just like, I think this guy's going to go there. I think after early conversations, it's like, I think they could do this. Like, I think they could get off the drugs, or I think they're going to make this transition. But I think, I think he's going to go to politics, whoever the person is. It's like, you believe they can jump in, and that's fun. Like, that's when you have something exciting, where it's like, I've got a care. It's like betting on, it's like a sports franchise betting on a player, when they're coming up in their rookie. It's like, this kid's exciting. I think something's going to happen when we bring them on,
But that, to use that analogy, that character's exciting because you've watched that kid in the minors score a lot of goals. So you're like, this is an indication.
Yeah.
And I think when I look at all my films, the most interesting ones is when there's characters who are already doing something interesting. I don't have to push them to be interesting.
Oh yeah, of course.
And I think it's because if you're, as a filmmaker, and you're finding that you're thinking so much about how you're creating the shot, it's a good indication that the story might not be there. Because I find Joel Paquette from Kill or Be Killed, or Ricky sorry, let me think of, when I think of Ricky and Chris from Chase It from the South, or Renault, any of our characters, I was just following them. Well, and they were doing interesting stuff. Eventually I craft the film.
They also had, like, just if you look at the texture, like the world in which they were in, right? These guys have this tornado chasing truck that they had spent years building with all the computers and radars and stuff. For Scott, it's like they have the ambulance. It's like you're walking into something that's been built.
Yes.
With Sean, it was, you're walking into a guy whose entire body is tattooed. He's welding. It's like there's a life that's been, it's like there's a lot of choices that have accumulated in this person that you're coming to. It's not frankly, it's just not a boring person.
Exactly.
It's somebody who, they're riddled with decisions, some good, some bad, but no shortage again of courage and purpose of kind of where they want to go with life. So I think that is a good indicator for young filmmakers to look at, is just like, what does the world look like around them? It's like, is this, if are they in the middle of something? Are you going to actually be following anything? Or again, is this kind of more, I don't know. Are you scratching at the surface for something that's, it's almost, if you use a dating analogy, it's almost like a pretty girl, but there's nothing there.
But
like,
you as to push not against that, but I think of Maya Bankovic. She's in The Cinematic Eye. She shot a film, God Heals Legs. It was about a lady who had an illness and her legs were kind of impaired, and it was just shot on tripods in her suburban home, like just a townhome in the middle. And it was like, it was what you would think is really boring, but what was unique was this woman was praying and believing every day. She's like, God's going to heal me.
That's interesting though.
Because again, it comes back to the passion.
Well, Sean was welding. He was living in a basement.
You're right.
And it was nothing. It was in Bowmanville, Ontario.
Yeah.
Look at Ray. No one would have picked him up.
Yeah.
Like Clear Sky, no one would have picked him up. No, it's not. Yeah. Thank you for that. Let me be careful. I'm not just trying to say like, find the most exciting
environment.
Right. Yeah. It's not, you're not trying to find a clown at a circus, although that, it could be interesting, but it's like, you need to read between the lines and look at where the character is at, how they've gotten there, and kind of the weight in their life. Like, what is the weight on them, and do you feel they're going to be able to carry this weight, or they're going to get it off? Like, is some metamorphosis going to happen?
Yeah,
like that. So it doesn't matter. Absolutely. I mean, I love. I'm totally
Florida
suburban.
Project was just like in like a little motel.
Yeah, anybody had access. Anybody could have made that film. Like, I love films where anybody could make that film. It wasn't necessarily the CBUM or Transformer where they're like such big characters.
Yeah.
Wesley, like Boston Marathon champion. It's like those. I'm not saying just look for that superstar character. It's trying to find that character who portray some superstar characteristics, even in their ordinary life.
The passion. I think of Late Frost, one of our best one-day doc winning films. Those people were up in the middle of the night putting stoves out in the middle of a forest or orchard to keep these apricots alive. Like, it's like they're apricots, but it's like they were so passionate about it. I think
it gets the audience excited.
Exactly.
Their excitement and passion. Like, if they don't exude that, the audience isn't going to catch it. You
need to find. It's like I was just at a wine tasting this weekend. I don't go to them often, but it was at a place called Pearl Morset, and they're so passionate and so different. And like, none of their wines, they don't even call their wine Chardonnays and all this. They call them like, it'll be like, I don't know, like the dark horse or whatever. Like, right. They're so passionate about their wines that they don't even know how to categorize them. And they're the best wine, some of the best wines in Ontario, if not Canada. And I mean, they can definitely go to bat with wines around the world. But all that to say, these people are so passionate, and you can just see it in the environment. See it. Right. It's like, that's where it could just be a vintner in the middle of an orchard. But if there is something that goes beyond them wanting to be average, that's where I think it makes a film interesting. Because you look at any film and it's like, you're not going to make Rocky didn't want to be average. It's like, you're going to make a film about someone trying to push their limits of their capability or their emotional abilities. It's like,
even though he started, completely, he started. I mean, it's a good example, Rocky, like as a character who is completely average, doesn't have any shot.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you're doing the documentary and you meet Rocky on the street and you talk to him for a bit, you'd be hard pressed not to want to do a doc on him, because you're just like, man, this guy, he's a tough guy. He lives on the streets of Philadelphia. He's collecting money. You don't know where the story's going to go.
Yeah.
I think that's why I pick these characters, is because in documentary, you don't know where the story's going to go.
Yeah.
But you need to believe you're with someone who's going to go somewhere.
Yeah.
That there is some stakes. And a guy like Rocky, had you met him on the streets, but you just know there's that this guy's got some, he's got some fight in him. Right. Mm-hmm. And what that looks like, does he make it to the, fight of Paul? You don't know the stage he's going to make it to, but this guy, no matter what he does, he's got this fight and this feeling in him. And I think that's a lot of that's filmmaking instinct. Like, I think it's getting out there, watching stuff, meeting characters, and just being like, who do you think, you think of Isaiah's dad, Eddie, and it's very clear it's there that, his dad will do anything.
Yeah.
Like, and you're just like, this guy will put his family at risk so that his son might have a shot of becoming the next UFC champion.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I'm with you. Like, I'll follow you because I know stuff's going to happen, and you're going to make some very weird decisions.
Eddie's one of those guys that when we step into the room, he can't help but be himself.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
And because himself is so easy. I mean, it's, I like characters who themselves is like,
not suspicious.
It's not suspicious. He is who he is. It's like a Donald. I think it's why people love a Donald Trump in America, especially because it's like, he's very different than Kamala. Like somebody, get politics, but like one person, you're not really sure what Kamala is. She might change perspectives here and there. Donald, you know exactly what he is and what he stands for. And I think for me, documentary filmmaking, sure, you want to uncover layers, but ultimately I want to know, that the character is who they are. Like, because otherwise you could spend 6 months with them and then you find out, oh, there's nothing here.
Yeah, I know we've had a few students tell us about projects where either someone there's that fine line, they were too eager to want to have the film made about them, and then it turns out they were actually lying about their life.
Yeah.
Or we've had this happen more often than not, and I'm trying to think of how to help our students avoid this, is we'll get emails being like, my character just bailed.
Yeah.
They don't want to do the film anymore. And I would have to know more about situation by situation, but often what I hear is the reoccurring theme is that they were convincing the person to be in the film.
Yeah.
So already the person had an apprehension about showing themselves on screen. And then when the going gets tough, or they haven't felt like they've known about the vision, or something goes on, or they don't like the process, they pull out. And so it's, I think...
Could do a whole conversation about that.
Yeah. There was one producer I used to work with on commercials, and I was so afraid of how he'd go about this, but I see why he did it, is when people would say like, oh, how long do we need to film for? He'd be like 12 hours. He would just say the biggest number possible that would be the worst case scenario. And I'm like, no, don't tell them that. You get it done in 4 hours. He's like, no, I'll tell them that. And then if we're done earlier, they'll be happy. He's like, but I need to know that they're willing.
Right. To go 12.
To go 12. He's like, because if they aren't, like, then we got to change things, or they might not be the right person for this project. He would want to see, like, are they committed to this as much as we are? As in, like, are they going to allow us into their life?
It's great.
It's like the times I've had struggled on projects, and even recently, is when a character is like being like already apprehensive about how much they'll give up of their schedule, and then that makes things extremely challenging down the line, because if they're not in at the beginning, it's tough, but I have been able to do this on some projects, get them more in as you go, but
it's a risk.
It's a risk. It's a huge
risk I wouldn't take unless there's high reward.
Yes.
Like, I wouldn't take it. I wouldn't suggest that for a first-time filmmaker.
No.
I think there's other projects you can find.
I would also, first-time filmmakers, just, if you're out there, stop trying to make a feature film as your first project. It's like, go make 10 amazing short docs.
Absolutely.
That'll do more for your career, and then you'll decide, even if you...
It can be 20 minutes, 30 minutes. It's fine.
Exactly.
It doesn't need to be 6 minutes.
It doesn't need to be. Yeah. I've had a real fun time the last few years just working on short docs, and like now, and then every once in a while doing a feature, and it's like it's totally fine. I find them the exercise in between. It's like, a lot of runners will do a marathon once or twice a year, but then they're going to go do a couple 5Ks, like just to keep it. And I kind of see that, but I try not to treat my short docs as like second rate. But when I was watching one of mine last night, and I was like, oh yeah, like this, I prided myself in having made that film that year. I'll just say it was Mile by Mile. It's like, I love the film, but I had done my CNN film that year, which was huge. I was filming the ASD band film at the same time. We were working on Clear Sky. It was our first year, or we had just launched the second module, and there was some other project I was working on in there, and I was like, oh, I'll sneak in Mile by Mile. And I remember being very overwhelmed and wondering why I did that. But I look back at the film in the end, I'm like, yeah, I just didn't have my full attention.
Right.
And it's like, so it was great. And I felt it as a flex to be like, I look at everything I did this year. And then, No Country is an Island came out that year as well, but it was on TV, or we released it. It was like, but in the end, it's like, I think, I don't know, less is more perhaps with your career. So,
yeah, it's something I talk about to students all the time, whether it's feedback hours or even just on calls. Like, actually, when we were in Buffalo for the Buffalo Film Festival, the superintendent came up, younger guy, and he's like, hey, and you guys are an AOD. I love it. My buddy, here he is. He worked in the building too, in the hotel. He's like, yeah, we've been wanting to join or whatever. He's like, any advice? And I was just like, yeah, I mean, keep your job, keep being superintendents at this building and try to make one awesome thing in the next year.
Yeah.
You know,
Great advice.
One thing would be great, because that one thing, if you do a really great job on it, you know, that can lead to a much bigger thing next year, right? And it's such a simple concept, but whether you're making your money doing your retainer work or being a superintendent, being a dentist, whatever your job is, don't confuse that with those bigger creative projects you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Right. And like you say, you don't need to be doing, you know, you don't want your attention going.
Yeah.
You want to give that very specific attention. Like Clear Sky, I give it very specific attention, you know, and I think that's why I'm so hesitant or careful how I release them, because it gets a lot of my heart.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you got to have that one project a year that gets all of your heart, that gets all of your focus, that gets all your love. And you know, you don't need to worry so much about doing a lot of things. You can do a lot of things in your corporate work. You can do a lot of you can stay busy in other areas, but something's got to get that special touch.
I don't think you're going to talk about a filmmaker being like, hey man, this guy makes about 4 mediocre projects a year. It's like, you're going to talk about that you can make one great film and still reference it. You can hey, he made this one. Yeah.
Most people are very lucky if they can make one great film in their life.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, if you can be, you know, if you can make one amazing thing in your life, it's, you know, it's a lot.
And also too, I've learned I've had to do this for myself, is not try to recreate magic.
Yeah.
Like, I look at some films that just had that touch.
Yeah.
And when we try to go out and do it again, it doesn't work. And I think it's just knowing, it's embracing what you have in that world. And that was one of the things I wrote down about the CBUM film, because I always keep a list of what I'm learning. And I go like, the struggles or the hurdles that your character's facing that are making the filming challenging, those are actually things to embrace in the story.
Right.
Like, if it's like, at times Chris didn't want to film with us, it's because he was, and I don't blame him, he was about to have his baby and he was struggling. He's like, do I want to go for a 6th champion and be a bad dad?
Right.
So he was struggling with the filming, and I realized it's like, I was just allowing myself as a filmmaker to feel tension, like, oh, I need more content. But I was like, no, I should have been more aware of what he was going through, and realize like, oh, this is actually part of the story. Mm-hmm. Like, whether, you know, he's really wrestling with this decision, and rather than being frustrated that we may not get the content early on, it's like, respect or realize that's actually going to play into the story. And so it's like then being present to what he's going through and being empathetic, or being aware to bring that into the film. And so, I think, you know, we always talk about being a custodian of your circumstances and not just trying to recreate everything to be something in the past, or recreate someone else's art. It's like, no, you have your voice. But I know you mentioned that the superintendents wanting to join AOD. What is fun, we'll mention, we made the decision now to finally keep the doors open
indefinitely.
We're trying that for a season here. A lot of people have been like, oh, I missed the doors opening, or this just didn't line up with my paycheck.
It's tough, I think, for people's, you know, a lot of people seem like they get paid on certain times, or they've got a project that's got to go now and they need the course then. So I think it'll be good.
It'll be good.
We'll keep the doors open. We'll do a few sales each year.
Exactly. And like few big sales, big discounts, but you can always join AOD at any point. That is either happened right now by the time this video comes out, or will be happening very soon. So be checking out the website there, and we'll be working on the producing course and adding more content. And looking forward to seeing his Clear Sky being released.
When will CBUM come out, you think?
We would want to release that documentary. We're just in the midst of landing perhaps one specific executive producer, but also landing the funding. We had to self-fund this up until this point. But it was one of those ones where we felt confident that we could get the funding once we went into post-production. But that will be released before next year's Olympia. That's the goal. So we're going to have a team of editors crushing it. It's going to be a lot of work.
It's going to be 3 parts or
3 parts. Yeah. The past, present.
3 hours?
3, I think, I think
minutes.
Because we included multiple characters, I think it won't feel like a long 3 hours, because we went to Germany to film it. We went to Amsterdam or Holland. We went to Brazil. You have the 4 of the top contenders in the most popular bodybuilding division in the world. At the most popular event, Chris's like pinnacle of his career, and him, you know, retiring. So I think in that way, and I'm almost afraid of like what I'm going to have to cut out, because you could make you could potentially make a 3-hour doc series.
yeah.
Well, seeing the way doc series are made now, they're like 6 parts and 45-minute episodes, and I'm always watching them like, man, they could cut out a lot of this.
This could have been 3.
This could have been a feature.
Yeah.
But I think this will definitely be. I'm just saying 3 episodes because I'm like, I would rather people leave and say, I wish I wanted more, and then perhaps what we'll do is, because Chris, his YouTube's growing so much right now. He's way past 4 million subscribers. He just like added another million on Instagram. He's at like 25.5 million followers. That I think there is a way to make not a second version, but almost like a director's cut or like a bonus thing. Like what I want to do is all the sequences that we cut out of the film is save those and be like, maybe this is an extra product that his super fans want to see. Like I want to make sure at the core, we protect the art of documentary. Like we make a good, not our company, but the actual craft of creating a good film. So if that needs to be 2.5 hours, if it needs to be 3 hours, that's what it'll be. But then of course, there's going to be these extra workouts that a bodybuilding fan would want to see him work out with so-and-so, or that just would bore my mom watching it, that aren't good for the actual storytelling. So that's been cool to think about, having such a huge fan base to add that as extra content. And that way too, I don't have to feel like I'm killing all my darlings perhaps, but I do want to obviously protect the film, and I can't wait to get some edits out and get your thoughts on it. And it's been great. Learned so much, and I'm going to be putting a ton of that into the course and lots of behind the scenes.
It's awesome.
Yeah, grateful for that whole team, Tad working on that, all the AOD students, and Calvin, of course, bringing us the project, and then of course Chris, Courtney, and people like Hani allowing us into their lives to tell that story. That's always the most gratitude I have. Is so easy to take that for granted that people are allowing me to film their lives, and it's like I wouldn't have any career in filmmaking if it wasn't for people being willing to trust me with a camera.
You do nature docs.
Yeah, I would do. Yeah, exactly. I would do. Maybe I'll go do what inspired me to get into filmmaking, the Koyaanisqatsi films, where you're just filming time lapses of the world, or super slow motion of a rocket ship going up. That rocket ship's not like, oh, we need to talk about my feelings.
That's awesome.
Awesome. Well, yeah.
Can't wait to see it, man.
Definitely. See you guys in the next one.